Lessons from Peter Thiel. I think the greatest investor, equity investor in my career, in my lifetime, is Peter Thiel. He still is, has been. I don't know what you want to use here as a tense. He has, in my opinion, as an investor, made the most money in terms of dollars that anybody has ever made, at least controlling for the capital that he invested. The episode previously was about George Soros, where we spoke about global macro investing and how Soros leans on things that want to happen anyway, and he just either leans on it or accelerates it. Thiel has a different approach, and for listeners who are interested, highly recommend to read Zero to One. I think it's the best business book ever written, and in my opinion, therefore also the best investment book ever written, because investing and business are two sides of the same coin when it comes to equity. Okay, so again, I want to differentiate. Interestingly enough, Thiel actually, I think, at once was a macro hedge fund manager himself, and I don't think that was a very successful endeavor. And it doesn't surprise me, because investing in companies is very different than macro investing. So Thiel's thesis in Zero to One is exactly how he also follows up in investing, and that's why he's been able to create this much value. He was an early investor in Facebook and also a co-founder of Palantir, so two of the largest startups that came out of Silicon Valley. And then obviously Facebook, huge. And then also he was instrumental in creating Vitalik Buterin's Ethereum, which is another multi-billion dollar, if not almost trillion dollar type project. So again, huge impact. And the purpose of this episode is to discuss Peter Thiel and his success as sort of a little mini series on lessons from investors. The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And we've spoken about Thiel and Clayton Christensen more deeply in previous episodes, where we went through chapters and discussed in great detail what these people are saying. So this is a summary of Thiel's investment thesis, which is related to Clayton Christensen's idea, depicted in The Innovator's Dilemma. Just before I go, I also want to mention that we have a principal stack here at Orange Capital Partners, which is basically the sort of the four books that we base our investment strategy around. Thiel's book is one of them, Christensen's the other. There's two other books, The Beginning of Infinity and The Innovation Stack. Check our website for more details. This is not even on podcast. It's January 8, 2025. This is Crimdelco. The fund was down 5% yesterday. The market down 1%. For the year, we are down 1%. The market's flat. We're underperforming by 1%. Just before I go into the discussion, we had quite a move on the Treasury side. Interest rates on the long end keep creeping up. We are still of the opinion that that's actually long-term a positive, that we have an upward sloping yield curve, which indicates growth, but we also have a problem with government spending and inflation, and it is up to the incoming administration of Donald Trump and the people around him to rein in the spending and the deficit. And if we can do that, we have a Goldilocks scenario. If not, then we have more trouble. And I think that's the macro situation right now. So let's talk about Peter Thiel and his investment strategy. The way I see Thiel's strategy is it's very, very unique to him. And he has a couple of sort of controversial, statements. For example, competition is for pussies or something like that, right? What does that actually mean? Well, you don't want to be in a market where you are elbow to elbow competing with other companies. That's not a good situation to be in. I don't know if it was him, but somebody once mentioned something very related, which is that the survival of the fittest, which has been sort of associated with Charles Darwin, actually it's a wrong statement, because Darwin never said that. Darwin said very specifically that you want to have your niche, you want to build your niche. So very much like in evolution, it is about finding your own unique way to adapt to the environment and take advantage of the situation that you're in and grow. Now, of course, there's different ways to do that, and a lot of species, as well as companies, do that in a more modest way. In other words, they find their niche, but they're not really large trillion-dollar companies, right? You can have a unique sushi shop in a nice ski resort in Switzerland, or you can have a special barbershop in Lisbon. You can make a living, you can do fine, but that is not what we're talking about here, right? What we're talking about here from a business perspective is that you need to be unique. You need to have a very special, unconventional view of the world. Thiel talks about mysteries and secrets. So you want to have secrets. Secrets are things that are achievable, that are knowable, but not most people know it, or maybe nobody knows it except you. Mysteries are things that are unknowable, at least at the given amount of information that we have, and probably never really knowable, and therefore also not really interesting and not attainable. So he wants you to have special secrets. He wants you to be unique. He wants you to be happy in your own way and not unhappy in the common way, to paraphrase Dostoevsky's line. I believe it was Dostoevsky's line in Anna Karenina. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think the beginning of the book starts something like that. So all happy families are unique in their own way, and all unhappy families are common in their unhappiness. So the same applies to companies. So what does he mean with that? Is that unhappy companies all have the same problem. They lack differentiation, to use a more business school type statement, right? They lack differentiation. They're too common. There's too much Me Too type development, and there's not enough really unique type of thinking about it. Now, and the happy companies all have that thing which is unique about them. So they're all happy in their unique way because they have something very unique about them. So let me put a few examples from the past, and then of course I want to bridge to today and explain how we think about this in the context of our portfolio. So in the past, you could have said, for example, Walt Disney, when he started drawing cartoons, that was a time when silent films were big. Actually, films just came up. So Thomas Edison discovers the videograph or something like that, basically making film, movable film and things like that. And then we have silent films and things like that. And now we have Walt Disney, so a person that likes to draw. I read his biography. I don't remember exactly how that all came together. I know he was in France in World War I. He was involved there and things like that. But anyway, so he starts drawing cartoons and he starts telling stories, fairy tale stories like Snow White through cartoons. That is a very unique way to tell stories, particularly in a time of silent pictures, moving pictures. So he combines technology and a very unique way of telling stories and creates an empire called Disney. Of course, in hindsight, you might think, well, duh, I mean, why is this so unique? You tell, kids a story through cartoons, but in 1920, 1930, that was incredibly unique. Let's jump forward. We have Steve Jobs creating an internet communicator on a phone, and in conjunction with David Benioff from Salesforce. That's a bit inside baseball, but there's this idea, the thing that really propels Apple and the iPhone to where it is today is not just technological development and having, let's say, enough battery power to have a phone and having a connection to the internet and broadband and things along those lines. I mean, those are very important ingredients. But the key is the idea of the App Store. And that is something that, again, is very unique. Nobody's thinking about it. I mean, there are a few people in Silicon Valley, but it's not a common thing. IBM, Microsoft, people like that are not, Google for that matter, are not thinking about it. So the App Store creates this amazing thing that we have iPhone today. Tesla is building electric cars, which on their own are already incredibly innovative, but you could still say sort of incremental. We have other people who can make those cars. We have a software-defined car, which is, I would say, certainly a unique way to build a car, but even that is not fully on the unique scale of 0 to 1. It's like, okay, fine, look, you're just doing what people have been doing with computers, with cars, fine, good for you. But what's really gonna make the difference is, of course, the Cybercab. And the Cybercab requires a car without a steering wheel. So you put constraints in the design of an existing product to create a new product that nobody has ever seen, nobody has ever thought that is possible, and most importantly, nobody actually demands because it doesn't exist. So this is the idea, this is the risk also that in this case Elon Musk and Tesla are taking to actually realize a vision that is a 0 to 1 vision, because once you have one Cybercab working and maybe one city working, then it will scale to one to end very quickly, because it is many, many times cheaper and many, many times more convenient and more a better experience. So altogether, it is going to be a much better experience at a much better price. And things like that usually tend to win. So those are some of the explanations. Maybe one more I can throw in, which Thiel talked about recently on the Rick Rubin podcast. Why did eBay not displace Amazon, or why did Amazon displace eBay? Right? eBay was before Amazon, and Amazon couldn't, eBay couldn't displace Amazon, which is interesting. And the reason they couldn't do it is because they believed in a model that was based on auctions, versus Amazon was interested in transactions. And also the key difference, of course, that Amazon helped Amazon succeed is they built the logistics network that is necessary to create Amazon. Also, they built AWS, which is another very unique way to do business, which came kind of adjacent to the business. And of course, that warrants its own podcast. But again, this is very unique thinking. Now, why am I talking about all this? For people who listen to this podcast frequently, it is really our goal here is to just sort of nudge people in a certain direction, right? And intellectually. So this is not investment advice. Please do your own work, follow your own stocks, invest in your own stocks, and don't contact us through this channel as far as investing is concerned. The purpose of this podcast series is to share our experience, and hopefully we can inspire some people to pursue this career or understand how to do it going forward. Now, talking about Peter Thiel, I think, again, he is the greatest investor in terms of dollars made, hands down. Like, particularly if you take the capital that he took, for example, investing in Facebook, and then the kind of money that was made, it's just unbelievable. And of course, I want to differentiate him as an investor versus the founder, right? There's people like Zuckerberg and Musk and Bezos who have created a lot more value than Thiel. They are founders. Thiel is an investor. That's the difference. So what is he looking for? This uniqueness, this very special way of thinking about investing. It's something that a lot of people talk about in terms of like, oh, you know, everybody wants to be unique. Everybody wants to have some sort of specialty or secret or something like that. And of course, most people talk about it, but don't do it. I think Thiel is almost the opposite. Like when he talks, I would say he talks very clear. He is very transparent. It doesn't sound very esoteric. He doesn't use a lot of complexities. But then his thinking is very unique. And the people that he puts in place as an investor, whether it's the people around Palantir or Facebook and other companies, they are very, very special. They're unique. So he really puts his mouth where the money is, or the money where the mouth is, actually, sorry. And that I would say that's probably the first thing I would say about him, that he's very honest and transparent about who he is and what he's trying to achieve and how he thinks about investing. So there's no convolution here. And, that sounds maybe common sense, but it's not. Most people don't do that. Most people are afraid of themselves when they invest. Investing is a very scary process because it's like jumping into the waters, into unknown waters. It's like I use the Christopher Columbus journey as a metaphor for this particular reason, that when you set out sail onto the unknown, into the unknown, the Atlantic is in front of you. You have no idea where you're going. You might or might not end somewhere. You are thinking of going to India. You end up in America, and you can call yourself a success, but it was a very tough journey because it was unknown. That's the way investing works in a nutshell, and it has to be like that. So if it is known, if for some reason you don't have that feeling as an investor, then you're not really investing in a wealth creating strategy. So for example, when we're investing in Tesla because we think that cybercabs will dominate transportation in a few years, that's a very unknown and uncomfortable situation to be in, because we have no checkpoints. We have nothing to really, nothing to calibrate ourselves against. There's no analogy. Elon Musk has said that many times. You can't invest by analogy. You can't think by analogy, not as an investor, not as an entrepreneur. So that's definitely, I would say, the second point. It is this Christopher Columbus type investing. Now, in order to do Christopher Columbus type investing, you have to be an explorer. And as Thiel says in the Rick Rubin podcast, most things have been explored in terms of geography. Like you can't invest in explorers anymore to go find copper in Antarctica or things like that. That's not interesting, because most of the actual physical geography of the Earth has been explored. However, where there's a lot of exploration is in, I call it, the world of science. The world of science, and that's where beginning of infinity comes into play, it is really infinite. Right? We have all these opportunities in artificial intelligence, in material science, in robotics, in space science, that could unravel new ideas, new techniques, new technologies, new problems that require even newer ideas and even newer technologies. And this is a flywheel that is incredibly positive for humanity, because it creates, basically it just democratizes humanity. In a nutshell, that's what it does, right? It makes things available at lower prices that people haven't been able to afford before, whether it's healthy food or safe transportation or warm housing or any of those things. The comfort that we're used to today has been driven by this flywheel of technology and science. So that's where the exploration happens. Now, is Peter Thiel a scientist? In a sense he is, and in a sense he isn't. So now this is my conjecture, and this is where we at Orange Capital Partners kind of, I think, cross paths with Peter Thiel. The way we see our investment strategy, again, leaning on 0 to 1, is we look at science, technology, and entrepreneurship. So when that Venn diagram intersects, that's where we're interested. So for example, we have the science of robotics, which is an empirical science. We have technology, which, for example, NVIDIA is building, computers, hardware that is in the position to deal with the kind of computation that is necessary for the science to be done and the technology to be executed. And then we have people like Jensen and Musk who are actually executing and scaling that up. So you need, in order to create wealth, I guess my point is, you need 0 to 1, but you also need 1 to n. You need both. And that's, I think, one thing where Thiel, I think there should be second edition, or not a second edition, there should be a follow-up, a 0 to 1 2.0, where he follows up, right? He follows up with that one to n, because wealth is really created with one to n, but it requires the 0 to 1 in order to make the 1 to n worthwhile. Because if the 1 to n becomes like Uber, which is sort of the canonical example of a not wealth creating company, which has a great technology, a great platform, but it's just not creating anything new, because look at the price and the experience that you have. It's incrementally better, yes. It allows a little bit more flexibility, but quite frankly, I'm not even sure if it's better. I used to live in New York City, and the cab system there was pretty okay. Most of the cities that I went to, the cab system, okay. The one thing that it does, I think the big innovation that Uber does, from my personal experience, is simply that you don't have to haggle with people in Brazil or Morocco when you take an Uber there. That's pretty much it. I think there's almost nothing else that they really add, but there's this huge infrastructure, $100 billion company, market cap, creating just a better way to pay. I think that's the problem with Uber. But anyway, this is not about Uber. I'm just trying to say, like, you need 0 to 1, you need this uniqueness, and then you need 1 to n. And that's something where Thiel doesn't talk too much about. But I think he is incredibly good at spotting the 0 to 1 that has the potential to go 1 to n. And that's really where the wealth is created. So to summarize, I think Thiel's approach, again, it starts with 0 to 1. That is the book that you want to read. That is the book that you want to lean on. The uniqueness, the uncomfortable Christoph Columbus type discovery, it has to be uncomfortable, but it has to be uncomfortable in a, let's call it, in a scientific way. Columbus wasn't crazy. Like, there was enough evidence, there was enough information available to him and his contemporaries to make the trip at least conceivable. Now, the actual journey was very scary, and again, it was the trip into the unknown. I also want to compare it with surfing, because when you surf, let's say, waves sort of more than 6 to 8 foot, maybe above 8 foot, you are put in a situation where you have to commit, and you don't know exactly how it's going to end up. You have a good sense, and good surfers have more experience, and so forth, but still, like, you have to commit. You can't wait and see, and you are in a situation for a few seconds, sometimes even longer, where it really is up to nature to decide how the journey is going to end. You don't have control. So this is a very short time frame, but it fits the same sort of frame of thinking, where you just have to commit. You can't step back and say, "Oh no, I don't like this." Right? If you don't commit, you're going to fail for sure. So that's the 0 to 1 time frame that Thiel is propagating for in the book, and I think that's the. It's not a secret because it's in the book. It really is the philosophy, and interestingly enough, even more than a decade after the book was published, I still don't see many investors following that strategy. They talk a lot, even the big ones, like, I don't know, people like Mark Andreessen, Horowitz, those types. Forget about the rest of Silicon Valley. I mean, they're all Me Too followers, very lack of uniqueness, lack of inspiration. And then every now and then somebody comes along that is interesting, that is inspiring, and those are the 0 to 1 type people. They're very scarce, and that in itself, I think, is almost worth another podcast episode. The question why that's the case. Why aren't people more aggressive in applying the strategy? Again, this would be a question, of course, again, needs to be discussed. I think it has to do with human inertia and fear, and the sort of education system that we are imposing on our kids that makes them actually followers and Me Too type people, instead of giving them the courage to be 0 to 1 people. So there's a lot of new problems that come out of this one solution, which is how to create wealth with a 0 to 1 mindset in a Columbus style investing, and with the ability to turn that 0 to 1 mindset into 1 to n. Thank you.